This is the Cigar Snob Podcast. I'm Nick Jimenez. In this episode, we're doing something a little different. As you'll know if you follow the industry, the cigar world was dealt two major blows with the deaths of Padrón Cigar's patriarch José Orlando Padrón and Oliva Cigar's patriarch Gilberto Oliva Sr. Both men led operations renowned for their quality and consistency, and the impact they made on the world of cigars, especially Nicaraguan cigars, will be felt for a long time. We figured the best way to bring you closer to these men, their lives, and their stories would be to talk to some of the people who were closest to them. In the next episode of the podcast, we'll hear from those who were close to Gilberto Oliva Sr. In this episode, you'll hear from friends, family, and cigar makers close to José Orlando Padrón. Rather than give you interviews, I'll largely be stepping back and letting them speak. We'll start with José Orlando's son, Jorge Padrón.
So there's one story in particular that I always think about when I think about my father and of his way of thinking and the way that the certain principles guided him throughout his life. And it was back in the early 60s, right after he had started and founded the company, which he founded in 64. So I don't know, this must have been maybe late 65, 66, sometime around there. Well, first of all, my father was selling a bundle of 25 cigars, okay, long filler, for $6 a bundle. And that was a Corona size, 42 by 5.5. It was a number 4. So he would sell that for $6. And this gentleman came to him and said to him that he would buy 10,000 cigars and he would pay him $10 a bundle. And my father, who didn't have two nickels to rub together, he's saying to himself, what the hell? How is it possible that this guy is willing to pay me $10 for a bundle if I'm selling them for $6? And he says to him, well, what I want to buy the bundles at $10, but I want you to sell them to me without bands and without cellophane. And my dad's like, well, why would you want that? Why do you want me to sell you the cigars like that? And why are you willing to pay me another $4? He's like, well, I've got a lot of boxes of Cuban H. Upmans that are the same size cigar, and what I want is to buy your cigars and put these bands on them. Well, my dad, at that moment, immediately said, listen, my name is worth a lot more than that, and this cigar is going to be better than those cigars. I don't want to take that deal. And he refused it. When I heard that story for the first time, our business was already much further along, and it's easy to think about that now and reject the idea because you don't need it. But it's a lot different to do it at that moment when you don't have a dime and you're trying to establish a business. He could have perfectly well sold him the cigars and it would have been the end of it, and nobody, it would have just happened like any other transaction. But the principle behind it wasn't the right one for him, and he refused it. And that was my father. And like that, I can tell you that there were many, many examples of him. And, he always quoted a phrase from Jose Marti, which said that men are created into two groups, those that love and create and those that hate and destroy. And my father was definitely in the group of those that loved and created. He helped everyone he could, and he certainly tried to build as much as he could, whether it be our family, our business. Later on in life, he established the Padrón Family Foundation, which now is going forward is going to dedicate a lot of effort and time and money to building a school in Nicaragua, as well as helping underprivileged kids in education and health. So it's a good thing. My dad never forgot those basic fundamental things of his life that he thought were important, and he tried to instill that into us to continue that. So I have great memories of my father. He taught me everything I know, and like I said, I was lucky, and we were all lucky to have him as long as we did. And he died at 91, but he died a happy man, surrounded by his family. I always thought that when I die, I want to be like that. I want to be able to put my head on that pillow and say, you know what? I've done everything I can. I've done it the right way. I've helped everyone I can, and my conscience is clear. And his conscience was totally clear. He was very grateful for being an American citizen. He always told me that he was happy to pay taxes, which I always laughed at. But he said, you know what? I'm happy to pay them because, the U.S. government gave me a chance. and I'm happy to pay these taxes because that's the least I could do. And it's funny because I look at my dad's first tax return. His income in his first year here was $1,000. And I have a copy of that here, and it's incredible to look at and say, damn, it's amazing what he accomplished, in this life. And that now we have this tremendous family that's all here. Everybody's united. My mother is thankfully with us, and and everybody's just grateful that we had the opportunity that we had, and that he gave it to us, on a silver platter. Yeah. And that our job now is to continue what he started and to live his legacy and live on in the way that he would have wanted us to live, which is to have a united family and to focus on the important things in life.
All right, I'm just stepping back in here to provide a little bit of context. When you ask smokers around the world what comes to mind when they think of Padrón cigars, one of the things that you'll hear often is that they see most or all of Padrón's portfolio as fitting roughly into the same flavor profile. In other words, it's a company that's built its reputation by doing one thing exceptionally well. So I asked George what, if anything, that aspect of the cigars reflects about the way his father lived.
My father was a very focused individual. He didn't try to be everything to everyone. He tried to be true to himself and what he thought the right, things should be. And, he always used to say that he made cigars for himself to smoke, and the ones that he couldn't smoke, he sold. And that was, actually, he said that to me one time, and I started laughing. I'm like, damn, that is so fucking true. That is exactly how, think about it. This is a product that is consumed. You develop a certain palate, a taste profile in your cigars. People gravitate towards that profile, and some will love it and some may not. And we've always been clear that there are some people who may not like our cigars, but we can't focus on the ones that don't like it. We have to focus on the ones that do like it. And I think there are many more that do rather than the ones that don't. So, our philosophy has always been to make cigars that we like to smoke. And that's basically what it's been. And that's how he put it in play. He was a very smart man in that, he had a certain way of thinking, but he allowed us also to develop and help the business. And a lot of the things that happened over the last 20 years, I was lucky enough to be a part of and to help influence the process. He certainly put us in a position to be able to develop all these products that we did. And he gave us a blessing, which is everything that we could have asked for, because, this was his baby. And for him to relinquish the controls of his baby like he did over the last 20 years, and I'm not saying relinquishing the controls like saying, here's the keys to the Ferrari, go drive it. No. He would lend us the keys for a short drive, and then we'd have to come back and park the Ferrari and let him drive it. You know what I mean? But he always gave us that chance. And that was a great thing, because he really prepared us for this day now when we have to, drive the Ferrari every day. And I think he felt at ease that he understood that we were clear on that mission. Over the last 20 years, we've developed some incredible products. And, I think that part of the success is that focus, is that we're not trying to be, we're not trying to make cigars new cigars every single day. Our thing is actually a little bit boring in a lot of ways, because our products are usually, we don't really introduce a lot of new products, but the ones that we do are very special. And I think that for a lot of people, that's a breath of fresh air, because, they understand that when they buy a Padrón, they know what they're getting. And that's something that I think has helped us over the last 20 years, whereas some of in the cigar industry, there has been an explosion of new products coming out. I think that it has been good for some companies, but for our company, what's been good about our company is that we haven't done that, and that we've stayed true to our roots and stayed focused on the mission, which is of making the best possible product we can.
Finally, I asked George a question about his father that I've posed to many celebrated cigar makers. This is one of those rare industries in which success comes with a certain degree of fame. So there are autographs, meet and greets, people wanting to shake your hand and have their pictures taken. Of course, nobody gets into cigars for that, and they certainly weren't seeking that kind of thing back when José Orlando Padrón was making his reputation. So what was his perspective on that aspect of his success in cigars?
My father was a people person.
Yeah.
He loved to interact with people. The money did not drive my father. Okay, obviously he was very successful and he accomplished a lot financially, which is a great thing. But that wasn't the motivating factor behind my father. What motivated my father was to make a great cigar and have people enjoy it and tell him that they loved his cigar. That put a smile on my dad's face. You know, I obviously interacted with him on many, many occasions in group settings. I never saw him embarrassed to sign anyone's box. On the contrary, he loved to do that. You know, he loved to sign things for people. He loved to take pictures of people. As a matter of fact, a lot of my friends who did not know my father in his professional life, they knew him more of coming here, smoking a cigar. You know, my dad was such a humble guy. But one time, a few of them went to an event and they saw like how they treated my father with such respect, and they were like, he was like a rock star,
Yeah.
you know, and they couldn't. I mean, they're like in shock because they're seeing someone that, again, out of his element here in Miami and the little factory and the whole thing, but he was just at ease, calm, happy, signing autographs, and the respect that people had towards my father was unbelievable. I mean, you know, people just loved him.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I think that when you do things from the heart, it comes out. And it obviously reflected in his product. And hundreds of thousands of consumers that smoke Padrón and that are so loyal to our brand, that to him was worth more than anything you can imagine. And he always told me that. He always said, the loyalty of the customer is the most important thing and the hardest thing that you will have to earn. Okay? Yeah. And once you earn it, it takes years to earn it, but it only takes a few bad cigars to lose it. So don't ever forget that. And that was something that he, kept repeating, kept thinking. You know, he always used to ask people is there any problem with the cigar? Those are his first questions. And sometimes I would say, Dad, you sound negative. And he's like, no. My job is to know if there's something wrong. And sometimes people may be embarrassed to tell me, but they can't. They have to tell me the truth. Because if there's something wrong, I need to know that I have to fix it.
Great cigar makers necessarily end up developing relationships with great tobacconists. One of those is Craig Cass, owner of Tinderbox Cigars in Charlotte, who recalled the time early in his own career when he met José Orlando Padrón for the first time.
And really, I consider the Padrón family some of my closest relationships in the business. I'm second generation in the business, very similar to George, and consider George one of my best friends in the industry, and I've known him over 20 years. And roughly 20 years ago, it had been somewhere in the mid-'90s, I was invited down to Nicaragua with 6-7 other retailers, and mostly guys that were George's vintage, all younger guys in the business. And we went down and really spent time with the family. And I had done other trips, obviously growing up in this business, to other factories, and there was always a sense of formality with those trips where you end up in the factory and you're in the fields. And my first experience down with the Padróns was really an amazing trip from a family situation. I feel like we were included as part of the family and ended up over in their home in Nicaragua. And one of my fondest memories of Orlando Padrón was him telling fabulous stories, in Spanish. And when George would laugh uncontrollably 3 or 4 times throughout his story, and at the end of Orlando's story, George would say, Dad, I can't tell these guys that. And he would really animated, again, speak to him in Spanish, and George would retell the stories, and we would all just laugh till we cried. And it made me realize, what a humorous man, and the takeaway for me was he was so giving of information and really got in the weeds with us on everything, from his background in Cuba to how he ended up in Miami and then opened the factory in Nicaragua, and really the trials and tribulations. And it was always family first, and honesty and integrity, and that just exuded from him. And sitting in Nicaragua in the mid-'90s, really before a lot of the accolades came, having a Cuban coffee and having a Padrón cigar and sitting there in conversation was really really an experience that I think of often, really, throughout the last 20 years. It's always been top of mind and made me realize I'm not just selling a product. I'm selling, a lifestyle. I'm selling honesty. I'm selling integrity. And I'm selling consistency. And I'm selling people that work hand in hand to make a great product year over year. And many times in life, you meet successful people, no matter what the industry is and what they do. And you always think, man, there's happenstance there, right place, right time kind of thing. But once you pull the curtain back and you sit down with people like the Padrones, and it all starts at the top with the man, and you sit down with him, you realize, man, I get it. This doesn't just happen. This was years in the making, and it's not going to go away. They're set up for generations of success. And it all started with José Orlando Padrón, and what a great man, and he'll be missed.
Abe Dababneh owns the smoke-in cigar lounges that are favorites of smokers in Florida's Broward and Palm Beach counties. When I asked him to say a few words about José Orlando Padrón, he told me that he didn't think he could do much better than a heartfelt open letter that he had written.
As time speeds by on the superhighway of life, one of the hard parts to swallow is the increased frequency of losing ones we love. The industry that I have dedicated my life to and that has embraced me lost another great legend, José Orlando Padrón. I was blessed with having a close relationship with Mr. Padrón. He affectionately referred to me as the Gordo of West Palm Beach. Over 20 years of going to Miami and interacting with the Padrón family, he always welcomed me with a warm heart. While he will undoubtedly be remembered for decades to come for building one of the greatest cigar brands in the history of this industry, I will remember him for something else. Growing up, I had 20 aunts and uncles, and I will always have a deep admiration for my grandparents who not only raised and provided for 10 children each, but overcame great obstacles doing it, never complaining, never resenting, just doing what needed to be done with love in their hearts. What I will most remember and admire about José Padrón is not the cigar empire he built, but the family empire he built. A family that I am sure he was deeply proud of. Many men find great success in business, and Mr. Padrón definitely found his, building one of the greatest cigar brands from scratch. Few men achieve such heights of success in building great families, though. And to me, that's exactly what he did. Never once in 20 years did I visit their headquarters and not witness every family member hard at work, working with love and pride for what they do. Imagine a whole company built by family, run by family, without the bickering and feuds that most families have, just living together. A truly amazing feat and a testament to the man that he was. As I now think of him, I am very happy for him. He was a blessed man who lived a blessed life. He not only built an amazing empire for his family, but also instilled in them all the ethic and emotional and mental fortitude needed to continue what he started. Being able to witness the family grow as large as the business had into multi-generations of dedicating and loving members has to truly be an amazing thing. I hope I'm fortunate enough to experience that in a lifetime with my family. Over the next few weeks and months to come, I'm sure we'll see many eulogies dedicated to the life's work of José Padrón. And while there's no question that he is worthy of every accolade that will ever be said about him, the great family man is what I will always admire most about him. To my dear friend, José Orlando Padrón, I am happy you were able to see the fruits of your many labors in life and taste its sweetness. You will be deeply missed, as great men are never easily replaced, and their passing creates vacuums not so easily filled. As you now rest and watch us from above, may your glass always be filled with dimple pinch and your Padrón cigar never ash. Your friend, El Gordo de West Palm Beach.
Next, we'll hear from Ernesto Pérez Carrillo of EPC Cigars, the maker of EP Carrillo, Inch, and La Historia, among other brands. He started with a story that José Orlando told him about the business side of making cigars in the early days of his company.
At the wake, we were talking, different manufacturers talked about, Padrón and, what stories, we remember. I told one about the fact that when he was, starting in Miami, he used to have a salesperson, a rep up in, New Jersey or New York, and he sent him some cigars, and he kept waiting for the, the guy to pay, and basically it was $600. So what he decided to do after, a few months or whatever, he says, you know what, I'm going to drive up there, I'm going to collect my money. So he went up, he knocked on the guy's door, the guy opened the door, and basically he was shocked that, Padrón was there. And he basically said, you have to pay. And, when I asked him, I mean, $600 was a lot of money at that time, but, when you take into account, you drive up that far and everything, you think about it, it's not, was it really worth it? He says, you know what, Ernesto, it's a question of principle. That's something that he had to understand that, with Padrón, with my name, with my principles, you can't play. And that was basically, Padrón. He was a man of very high principles. He was, a man, such a self-confident person that he believed with all his heart that he made, basically, the best cigars in the world. He had a confidence about him, the self-esteem, and he was a man that had no fears. And that's, I'm sure that we've all heard the stories of, during the revolution in Nicaragua, how he stayed in his factory and, they were taking basically shots at it, but he stayed there. So, I mean, he's always been a person that, I look up to, I admire, because of, aside his know-how, as a man, he was really special to me, The whole family is great, and I'm sure they're all going to, sorely miss José Orlando Padrón, because, he was one of a kind. And he had the history, he came from Cuba, started with nothing, and basically, achieved the empire which he has now. And let's face it, he was really, I think, in my opinion, the person that really put Nicaragua on the map, I mean, there's a lot of great manufacturers out there in Nicaragua, but, he was through, the good times and the bad times. And he was very instrumental in making Nicaragua, as popular as it is today. So he opened the door to a lot of the, the younger generation that's there now. And, we all have to thank him, because there's so many things that we could talk about as far as, tobacco, the knowledge that he had, the, things that, that I and him would speak about as far as, tobacco, fermentation and all that. And, the man was really, a genius at that. He had his own way of, working with tobacco, which, it's very inspiring. Let's put it that way.
Rocky Patel started his successful cigar company as an outsider to the industry. After becoming a cigar man and setting up shop in Nicaragua, he became close to José Orlando Padrón.
So José Orlando Padrón was a pioneer and a visionary in our industry. He had gone through a lot of trials and tribulations, Cuba, Nicaragua, all over, and he had worked through many challenges to make the Padrón Cigar Company a legendary, monumental company in the entire world and certainly in this country. And I admire him for that. I never had a father in the industry, and he truly was like a father figure to me. He created a brand that is very renowned, and most impressive about the man was the fact of the family that he created around him, employing, working with, and mentoring not only his two sons, but all the grandkids, cousins, aunts, uncles, relatives in that family. It was mobilizing how he had created this company and earned the respect and love that he shared with the entire family. So the parts I remember, some great stories, spending time with them in Esteli and when we were hosting, and had the people there from Cigar Aficionado drinking some scotch and listening to some of his great stories from Cuba and Nicaragua. And, he had a great sense of humor. But what I remember the most about him is, when we were fighting so hard to defeat the FDA, both on the legislative front and the legal front, and he'd always come and pat me on the back and said, just keep up the good work. Don't worry. At the Padrón family, we have your back. So I loved that about him. I respected him. He cared about the industry. He cared about the future. He wanted to fight for the premium cigar industry. And I always looked up to him as a father in the industry.
Our last tobacconist here is one of the cigar sellers Cigar Snob sees most often, since he's right in our backyard in Miami. Here's Jorge Valdés from Sabor Havana Cigars.
My brother went to school with Orly Padrón, but I met them back in the day when I used to have to go there with my father to the original factory or the original distribution center. I used to have to go there with my father to pick up cigars for my uncle. My uncle smoked the Padrón Fumas or the Cazadores, which are in yellow boxes. I sent the Padrones a picture one time that he had over 100 boxes in his garage. There were ugly cardboard boxes with yellow paper on it with the name. So I would go and I would buy cigars, and my father would send them to my uncle in Vegas because my uncle lived in Vegas, and that's what he liked to smoke. So many years later, somewhere about 1994, after going there many, many years earlier with my father and alone, I decided to get into the cigar business. So, of course, I went there to talk to them, and I talked to him, and he advised me on what to do and how to go about it. So, I kept going there over and over again and became very close to the family. They would have a ritual that they would get together, him and a bunch of his friends on Saturdays, and sit behind the counter, or he sit behind the desk, and they would hold court about politics and about business and women and jokes, and we would eat pastelitos de guayaba that people would bring, which were his favorites, and empanadas, and drink coffee and smoke cigars, of course. Over the years, I saw the kids grow. I saw, George come into the picture. I knew Elizabeth and I knew Lisette, and I got more and more into the business. They helped me immensely. And those Saturdays were ideal because I can sit there and I can listen to him, and he would ask me in his tone of voice, which is unforgettable, ¿Cómo están las ventas? How are the sales? And you could tell him, and when I had 4 stores, he sat me down one day and he told me, you need to focus. You need to concentrate on one thing. You need to make one thing better and then worry about everything else after. You have 4 stores. You're trying to, do too much, and you should consolidate. After years of making mistakes and not doing that, one day I decided to do that, and we sold and closed 1 store and sold to the other 2, and we consolidated everything to Doral, and it took us a couple of years, and it worked out just like he said it would work out. He was very tough on me. He was always on me for a lot of stuff. But, one day we had an event at the store, and I made mention of that in public. And I said, Orlando is very tough on me, and he's always on me to make sure that I'm making the right choices and that I'm selling Padrón. And George took the microphone and said, the reason why he's on you is because, he cares a lot about you. So we consider you family, and this was a couple of years ago. It was like about 13, when he came to the store and signed box number 7, Millennium box number 7, which I still have. We spent a lot of time together. When he couldn't go to the RTDA or the IPCPR, I would go visit him at the house and play dominoes while we watched everybody at the IPCPR on screen, because he had cameras. He had Caesar carrying around a laptop with a camera. And he was always very involved. He always wanted to see everything. He always wanted to read everything. He would give me stuff to read, accolades and things that they would write about Padrón and about him and about his brand. And it was always an amazing thing for people that he was able to do all that without what everybody else has. He's an anomaly. No salespeople. Everybody in the company, the majority of them are associated by family or our family that answer the phone. I always said that if you called Padrón back in the day, a Padrón would answer, and that would be true because it would either be Rudy or Orly or George or Elizabeth or Lisette or Flori, or he would answer himself. Orlando would answer himself. So, a great man, a determined man, a guy that always knew what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. He controlled everything from seed to cigar. and up to even, pricing and sale and distribution. You can see by the cigar boxes that it was all about the cigar, nothing about the fanfare of the box and these colored boxes or these elaborate boxes or labels. He put all his energy into the cigar. That was what he believed. I made mention one time at the Millennium Box that it was just like a huge shoebox, and he said, "The box doesn't matter, my son. What matters is what's inside." And he was perfectly correct. The cigars were, and I'm lucky enough to have box number 7 at Saurabana. The cigars are amazing. Great man. I'm going to miss him dearly. I'm going to miss his advice. I'm going to miss his laughter. I'm going to miss seeing him on Saturdays. Every time I eat a pate de guayaba, I'm going to think of him. Regardless of every time I smoke a Padrón, I'm going to think of him. So I wish him Godspeed, and I wish his family peace. He had a very, very good life. He lived a long life, and he lived it to the fullest. And I am proud to have been part of that, and I'm honored that I was able to share great moments with him and his family. Recently, we went to Jessica's wedding. We were part of that, my wife and I, and we were honored that they consider us as close to family as family can be.
Jonathan Drew, founder of Drew Estate, is another cigar company founder whose family history was never steeped in tobacco. He took a deep dive into Esteli and became acquainted with José Orlando before Nicaraguan cigars really caught fire.
So my experiences with Orlando Padrón began at my earliest stage. Actually, prior to moving to Nicaragua, when I would go down to Esteli and you would bump into Nestor Plasencia, in a restaurant, maybe eating or checking tobacco, and you kind of would bump into people because the options of places to go were very small. There might have been 3 real restaurants in town, and there might have been 1 hardware store. There were no fast food restaurants. There was 1 gas station, actually 2. And you would just bump into people more often because of the lack of destinations in the city. So bumping into Orlando Padrón, the most unusual run-in with Orlando at the earliest stage prior to moving to Nicaragua was in Managua, going to a national hall meeting regarding the Zona Franca factories for the country, because they were just establishing Zona Franca, which is free trade zone for Nicaragua. And there was quite a debate going on. And I remember being in a auditorium, small, with maybe 50 cigar guys from different places in the world, and Orlando was there. And it was a moment where watching how the government would listen to him and watching how the people would respond to his advice was incredibly interesting. After I moved to Nicaragua, we became friends, and Orlando Padrón is the one who titled JD as the Gringo Loco. So all of those experiences with Orlando Padrón were always positive. They were always fun. And he was always trying to be in the mix and relevant in Esteli, and everybody loved him. So they were great memories. They could go on and on from the years of just Esteli life and really being there for 14 years on a full-time basis. And that was the other thing that I loved about Orlando Padrón, was he was really there all of the time. He was living in Nicaragua. So during those 14 to 16 years that I was living there, he was part of the scenery of Esteli. He was part of the movement. He was part of what was going on. All of the old timers who were, the original fabric of the pioneers of Nicaraguan tobacco. Orlando always played a role side by side with Nestor Plasencia and a few others, basically as the mentors to the next crew. Probably the most impactful memory of my entire time in Nicaragua that would deal with both Gilberto Oliva and Orlando Jose Padrón was at the first or second Nicaraguan cigar festival. We at the factory, myself and Jesse Torres, what we did was we honored both of them. I believe it was the second one with a trophy that Jesse made by hand for them. And we honored them at 80 years old for all of the gifts that they've blessed the entire premium cigar industry, and for all of the all of the education and experience and what's the right word, but all of the achievement. It was a 80th year achievement trophies that we made for both of them. And it was a really big moment bringing them on stage in front of 200 people from all over the world, probably 30 or 40 countries, and having the two of them accept the award for their excellence. So for me, that was a personal, special moment because it was my idea, and Jesse carried it out by creating the awards. Last great thing that always makes me smile was my PCPR, could have been year 2001, 2002, but having all of Estelo Padrón, Orlando's brother, who ran the Vilazon factory in Honduras, and Bob Francois, and Orlando Padrón, and all of the guys from Johnny Oliva, everybody coming to our IPCPR show booth. And the music was on, and everybody was going crazy. There were women in the booth and guys. Everybody was dancing, having a great time. And Orlando Padrón was right in the middle of everything, just going totally crazy, enjoying himself in the Drew Estate booth. And everybody really loved seeing that. My mom and dad were there. So that was just a great moment early on where at the IPCPR booth, that was a very communal and very spiritual, moment towards the end of the last day of the show.
Albert Hernandez is a founding member of the Bastards, a close-knit group of Padrón superfans who get together for herfs and have managed to make themselves part of the Padrón Cigars family.
I truly loved and respected José Orlando Padrón. He reminded me a lot of my father, who passed away in 2009. He was very simple, and he was very humble, and he was a smart guy. He was a very smart guy, and the more you knew him, the more you realized he was a very intelligent guy and very reserved. I was going to the factory and listening to his amazing anecdotes and experiences. He told incredible stories. I mean, stories that were amazing. But most of all, I think I'll miss laughing with him. He was a great storyteller, and we used to tell each other jokes and laugh like dummies. He was an amazing human being. To me, what gave my respect is he was the prime example of a Cuban exile who came to the United States, and from hard work, perseverance, humility, and honesty, built not only a dynasty, but an amazing family. I mean, you can always tell the way people are by the way their kids are, and that family is amazing. They're all wonderful, wonderful people, down to the grandchildren. I mean, he's definitely be one of the guys that I always think about and remember, because he was an exemplary human being and a great leader to his family. The Bastards were a secret society, and he was hip to it. I think he really enjoyed the fact that we were also united, and we would have a reunion in the cigar in the factory once a year, a smoker every year, and he loved it. He enjoyed it, and he sat with us, and he played dominoes with us, and he talked to everybody, and enjoyed the fact. But I'm telling you, he was such a humble guy. He didn't realize that we were just enjoying the best cigars on earth and enjoying his company, because he was just a treat to be with. He was just an amazing individual, and the things he had achieved in his life were the most interesting thing about him. He was. Every time I went by there, he was always working. At his age, nothing ever slowed him down. It was amazing. I love playing dominoes with him, because if I by some chance was able to beat him, he would look at me with this particular face that I'll never forget, and then he would destroy me. It was hysterical. He was very competitive, and I thought that was awesome.
Back in 2016, Carlos Fuente Sr.'s death rattled the cigar world, in particular, the Dominican cigar world. His son, Carlito Fuente, knows the pain of losing a business and family patriarch. The Fuentes are known for their Dominican operation now, but Carlito used to spend much of his time in Nicaragua, where he began to develop a deep respect for what José Orlando was building.
They were two different human beings, he and my father. They were different in ways. Each one was an individual, but yet they had, to me, they had so many of the common characters. First of all, they were their work, their ethics, their integrity, their commitment to their craft, and most importantly, which is equal, their commitment to their family. I see so many similarities in Orlando and my father, and not that I want to speak about my father. This is not the moment, but Orlando was like a father to me, in the sense that he set the principles, and he set not the tone, but the strength of what a man's man is in many ways. I remember the story. Our factory was burned the same day. When we were in Nicaragua back in the 70s, our factory was burned the same exact day. There were 4 factories burned. There weren't many factories in those days. I think there was only 4, maybe 5 in Italy. And one was Padrón, the other one was Carlito Garcia-Tuñón, the other one was Somoza's factory, and then our factory, which was called Don Victor back then because of Fernando Fruticiella, the old Cuban family. It was called Don Victor, which we were partners with Juan Francisco Bermejo and Angel Oliva. And I remember, going to where I used to go every evening after work. My father and I, we used to go to a Chico motel, and Orlando was always there playing dominoes with a few Cubans that were there at the time and just telling stories and so forth. And I always remember him being a man that, besides his work ethics, which are non-questionable, he was a man with great pride. He was a man with, like my father, probably one of the biggest balls, if I could say that, courage that existed. I remember the day after the fire, when they burned our factory down, or a day, maybe 2 days after, Orlando was in Costa Rica speaking at the Diarios of America, accusing Somoza and so forth and standing up to him. He went through a lot. He stood up for what he believed in. But I think one of his greatest accomplishments, aside from the cigars and everything, is that he set the base and the foundation for the next generation, for his children, who follow his footsteps, who are hardworking, who have the integrity and the honor and the ethics. And I think that's the greatest accomplishment of a human being. It's more than the products they create, the happiness it brings to people. It's also that it's a legacy that will live generations to follow. And I think that Orlando Padrón's greatness is just that.
Father Willie García-Tuñón is the president at Belen Jesuit Preparatory School, the all-boys Jesuit prep school that Jorge Padrón and other members of his family call their alma mater. I'm also a graduate of the school, as is Father Willie himself. Father Willie is an avid smoker and a close friend of the Padrón family.
He's at the top of the food chain when it comes to the cigar industry, but also just as a human being. I mean, the fact is that he was the epitome of the living the American dream, as a guy who comes to this country after leaving Cuba with nothing and is able to build an incredible empire that's respected around the world, not to mention myself in particular. The one anecdote that I would share is that as the family's priest, I had many opportunities to share at a very intimate, level with the family. And I will share with you that a lot of people are not aware of the fact that Orlando had a very strong devotion. As a Catholic, he had a very strong devotion to one particular saint, which was Saint Barbara, whose feast day is on December the 4th. And it's a devotion that he carried with him for many, many years, ever since he was in Cuba. My favorite cigar, the cigar that I smoke from Padrón, is the number 4, which is of the 64 series, and it's the number 4 cigar. I love the size and the taste, and all of it is great. I was unaware of the fact that it was named the number 4 after St. Barbara because her feast day is celebrated on the 4th of December. But the anecdote comes that a couple of days before he passed away, he called me to go to the hospital to visit him, and he asked me to go, and so I dropped everything and I went to go visit him. And everybody was in the room, in the hospital room, shortly before his dying. Everybody was in there, and he asked everybody to leave the room, and only I was in the room with George, his son. The day was December the 3rd. He said to me that he was asking me for a favor. He asked me to pray so that the Lord would grant him the opportunity to die on the feast day of St. Barbara, which happened to be, like I said before, the 4th of December, which was the following day. So I told him, I said, listen, it's up to the Lord to take you whenever he feels you're ready. I go, but I will ask him that if he could find if it's possible for it to be on the 4th of December on the Feast of St. Barbara. That was his petition. And interestingly enough, he actually died December the 5th, the day after, but he missed the day only by about 20 minutes because he died at 12:20 in the morning on December the 5th. And in thinking about that whole situation, I came to the realization that I was convinced he had such a strong devotion to Saint Barbara that in order to not take away any importance or any focus on her feast day, he just waited a very gentleman-like 20 minutes and went ahead and left us on the following day.
Finally, we'll hear from José Oliva. His father, Gilberto Oliva Sr., died about a week after José Orlando Padrón did. The two men were close, and we asked José to reflect on José Orlando and his relationship with Gilberto.
Well, my first recollections of Orlando Padrón was as a small child. My dad, when he was in town in the late 70s, early 80s, whenever he was in town, we lived in Hialeah. So my dad would tell me, early on a Saturday morning, vamos a Miami. We're going into Miami, which was, at the time, a big thing. They were going a long way. And we would go and we would go by Five Vegas, and we would go by what is the name of, my goodness, it's been such a while, I've forgotten. But we'd go see Pedro Martin if he was in town. We'd go see Rolando Reyes if he was in town. There's some other Benny Gomez at Intercontinental we'd go see, and we'd go by and see Padrón. And it was, what a different time. I mean, you paid people visits, which is, there's a comedian, Sebastian Maniscalco, that has a great bit on paying people visits. But this was a thing. I mean, you literally would go and pay someone a visit, and no one would ever wonder, what are you doing here? Well, there you were. You were just coming by. And so I remember that as a kid, we'd go visit Camacho. Simon Camacho, the original Camacho, had a factory down near Padrón. And you'd go in there. And as a kid, I'd go, play around at the tables and with the molds and whatever, and they'd be talking. And they'd be talking for an hour and a half, smoking their cigar. And my dad would say, come on, we're going. And we'd go to the next place. And we'd spend all Saturday visiting people. And Padrón was one of them. And so I don't have much of a recollection of what they spoke about. But what strikes me even still today is the fact that they all had respect and deference for one another. I mean, you go and you visit someone and you spend time talking to them, and you go, there's a real respect. It's of a time gone by when things like that would just happen. These guys had all been through many similar things, and so I remember that. Outside of that, obviously, I mean, what can be said about Padrón? I mean, he was the pioneer of Nicaraguan cigars. I mean, he kept that torch lit during a time when it had mostly gone out, and I think it's altogether fitting that he had the position that he had in the cigar world and in Nicaraguan cigars as a whole because of his massive contribution to it.
At Cigar Snob, we know that cigars are generally a symbol of celebration, And while losing people is sobering, the idea here is to bring you in on a celebration of the lives of men who left the cigar world so much. So, to that end, an upcoming episode of the podcast will follow a similar format with friends, family, colleagues, and competitors remembering the life and legacy of Gilberto Oliva Sr. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and share this episode with anyone you think might want to learn a bit about José Orlando Padrón. Until next time, I'm Nick Jimenez, and this is the Cigar Snob Podcast.